Okay, Terry and David, you've asked me to run a little video of me working on that mathematical equation that you had sent me the PNG of. So I've got the program open, and I'm sure you already know that under the Auto Digitizing tab, we can insert the artwork. Now, first of all, though, I just want to remind you that there's two different ways that we could go about basically this project. You could start with the plain old artwork uh, toolbox, and wherein we could insert the artwork and find our little piece of art that we want to work with, and we could go ahead and open that, and it would bring it into the workspace. And from here, one of the things that we could do is we could automatically enlarge this piece of artwork to as big as we think that we're going to want to make our embroidery design. So this would be the first way that we would be doing this as a manual digitizing project, which basically means that we would then just come into each one of these little pieces of the symbolism, and we could digitize them ourselves using some of the tools that are in the digitizing toolbar. But there's also the easier way of working with this project, which is using our automatic digitizing toolbox. And that's what I'm going to concentrate on for this exercise. So first of all, again, we'll just turn on the auto digitizing, and step number one is to insert the artwork. And again, what we're going to do is just click on our artwork, and we're going to open it up. All right, so I've now got two pieces of artwork here in the project, and I'm going to come over to my sequence bar and delete the first one that we were working with. So again, what I'm going to do with this is actually open up an embroidery hoop so we can get a feel for how big this design actually is. So this is our ASQ22 hoop, which is a 220 millimeter hoop. Now at this point, I have no idea how large you all want to make your embroidery design. And you always will get the best results with your design if you know from the outset how big you want your design to be. So let's just say that for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to come back to my smallest hoop, which is the 5-inch hoop. I'm going to select the artwork, and I think what I'll do is I'll make this about not a full 5-inch size design, but somewhere in that vicinity. Okay, and I'm just going to center it here in the hoop by just kind of dragging it around to get it centered. The next thing that I'm going to do with it is I'm going to choose one of the various tools that is available in our auto digitizing artwork options here. So what we have here is the click to fill. So if I click my artwork and I choose the click to fill, actually what happens, I could even choose one of the other ones here. Let's start with auto digitizing as an instant embroidery. Maybe this is what you all started with the very first time you tried it. So the artwork was selected, and I just selected the auto digitize this instant embroidery. And there it is. We can zoom in on it. I've got the 3D turned on, and we can just look at this and see how well of a job did our auto digitizing do. Well, one of the reasons why people that digitize oftentimes don't like the auto digitize is because it kind of will interpret the artwork in funny ways. Let's look at this here, and we can see that this is a satin fill. Did a pretty good job on the satin fill for the lines right here, and maybe even that symbol. But over here, you know, it chose to interpret this object as a tatami fill, which is also known as a weave pattern. You know, so we've got this mixture going on of satin fills and weave fills. And yes, we could come in here and we could select each one of these objects individually, and we could adjust those fill patterns on them to get a better result. So that's one way that we could work with this design. So for example, if we decided we wanted satin fills all the way around, I could select this one here, and I could convert it to a satin. And you can see that it did that. You can also see the angle of the satin stitches that it did in here, which I could change if I so wanted to do. Now, the one thing I want you to notice about it is that this could be also broken apart and treated as two different objects so that we could change the satin fill on all of it. But basically what I can do with it is I can select the reshape tool. And here is where we get all of our little design nodes, When you see little blue circles, those are curved nodes. When you see little yellow squares, those are points. So in other words, if I were to move this out, you would see that that has a sharp point to it. Okay, so just moving things around here. This is a circle, and it would keep that curvature shape. So this area here that you see here is called the wire line, and that's the line that these nodes sit upon, where I can drag them and I can change the size and the shape of this object. All right, if I had a point that I wanted it to actually be a curve, I could just hover over it and click on it. When it turns purple like that, I can hit the space bar on my keyboard and it turns it into a curved node. So that's also a helpful thing for when you want to start changing the shapes of your objects. The other thing that you're going to see in this object here is this big diagonal line with the orange squares on the end of it. This is your angle line, and I can drag that angle line by just holding down my mouse key, my left mouse button, and I can adjust the angle. And you can see that that can make a huge difference in the appearance of your object. But let's take a look at it again. You know, it did some nice object. I like the angle change that it did here on this one, you know, but what I probably want to do in here is move some of my objects, some of my nodes around a little bit just to get a little bit smoother shape in here, you know, and just fine tune it a little bit. Another thing that I probably would want to do is not see this crossbar going at the same angle. This zero angle or more is more or less what it is. Probably what I'd like to do with this object is come out of the reshape tool. Maybe I'm going to hit my escape button. I'm going to select it and see if in the edit object toolbar, if I've got an option to break this apart. And right now, no, I don't have it. So what break apart does is sometimes when you've got an object like this, if I select break apart, it would turn it into two different pieces that then I could edit those nodes and those stitch angles independently of one another. But because of having done this as that auto digitize, it's not allowing me to break it apart. So what I'm basically trying to tell you all is that yes, you can do the auto digitizing. Sometimes it does a better job than others. You know, over here with this object here, you know, maybe we could come in here and change some stitch angles and so on and so forth. One of the tools that's available in the edit objects is once this has been selected, I could actually add some stitch angles in here. So I could turn that tool on and I could draw a line here and change that into a different angle. That's one way to go about making some better changes to some of the angles of your objects. All right, so basically that's using the full-blown auto digitizing. Next thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to undo all of those changes that I made to this. Let's just get all the way back out to we're here and we have done no digitizing at all. All right, so this is the original artwork. I'm going to select it. And then under the Auto Digitize toolbar, let's go ahead and open up the toolbox. Instead of using the Auto Digitize Instant Embroidery, this Auto Digitize Embroidery, we're going to have some other options that will be available to us. This is where it's going to process the original bitmap and maybe do some processing to it that might give us some either better or worse results depending on our artwork. So let's just say that we've reduced our colors to two different colors. Basically, the two colors are going to be a background of white, I think, and maybe the red of the letters. Let's see if it'll let us get it down to just one. It's only one color. Let's just see what happens here. Embroidery detail is fine. And what we're doing here is our details. Color of thread is that. Let's see. Let's say we're going to make the details as a satin fill. If I were to select this, I could do satin lines. Center lines. We'll look more at this in a little while. Let's just keep it as a satin fill for now. And let's say OK. And again, it has digitized it. And, you know, on first look, hasn't done too much differently than what we got with the first selection. Okay, we see that we've got some satin fills mixed with some weave fills. We've got some funny angles going on. In essence, it's the same as the first choice that we did. Let's undo. Let's select our artwork once again, and this time let's come down to, these ones are mainly dealing with actual photos like of people and pets and that kind of thing. So let's skip down to the click to fill. And what will happen here is you don't see anything instantly happening on the screen, but notice what happens when I hover over any one of these objects. Let's zoom in, and what you're going to see here is this little web. And what will happen is when I click in this shape and then click off of it, we can see that we are creating stitches over each one of these objects. All right, so what's happening here is these are weave fills. The nice thing about this technique is that I can select any one of these objects, and again, I can come over to my fill project properties. I can change them from the tatami weave into a satin weave, and it actually looks a little bit, kind of nice. What I can do here is come into the edit objects, and I can add some stitch angles. Let's just say that I want a stitch angle here to be just a little bit angled up like that. Do I like what that did? I think the thing that's going to happen here is it's only going to allow me to have one stitch angle per object. So maybe not the best solution. All right, let's see what happens here if I change that to a satin fill. Let's see if I want to reshape it by using my angle button. Maybe get some different fills like this. Let's see what will happen if it'll let me do any added stitch angles across this object. It may not. It may just want to keep that one stitch angle. Yep, it's only going to want to keep the one. So, again, we're kind of playing with some, maybe what might be a lot of time and effort putting into this project. All right, so let's come back to our image file under the auto digitizing. Let's now try to click to fill without holes. Now wait and see what happens with this one. This can do some funny stuff. See that? It converted that, and indeed it does not have the hole there that we might want. So this might be fine for some of the pieces, maybe for the parentheses and some of the other things that we then might want to go on and do some editing to. But obviously for these ones that have holes in them, that wasn't a very good choice, was it? Click to fill, and let's change that one again. I don't know if it's going to let me undo. Let's see. Let's take that back out of. Okay, click to fill. This is actually one of my favorite ones, is the click to turning fill. Let's take a look at it. Okay, our object needs to be selected. Let's do a click to turning fill. So what turning fill is it's a more sophisticated version of dealing with a satin stitch like this. So remember when I was creating a turning fill on this, I was just able to adjust the stitch angle of 1 to 1 angle for that entire object. Let's see what happens when I select it this time with my turning angle fill. All right, so you're going to see here that I've got some different angles. Can you see that? Some angles going this direction, up in that area there. So basically, when I come into this little piece and I look at my reshape tool, I'm going to see all these different stitch angles in here now. So here's one here that I could change into that. This one over here, I might want to push it up to that direction, and not only this, being able to adjust the stitch angles that the turning fill created for me in my edit objects. I could even add in some more stitch angles if I wanted to. Let's say I wanted another one somewhere along in this angle here, and doing something with that angle. Okay, let's see if that's going to do it. Oops, it didn't like my object. So a little bit more options for adjusting your figures using the turning angle object. Back to auto digitize, let's look at what click to an outline looks like. All right, click to outline. Which one might we want to play with? Let's play with this one here. What does that look like? It just put an outline all the way around that part of the design. So that's what click to outline does. Clicking to center line, if I do that one, let's undo the outline one. Okay, so let's go to click to center line. This one is going to just put a center line right through the object there. Might work out better on our little plus sign. Maybe it'll work good there. You know, so this gives you a totally different look. It's basically just giving you a single line. Let's see if I can look at the object line. It's an outline. It is a single run. If I wanted to change that single run to a triple run, I'm sure it will let me by choosing it over here. It's this object here. Let's change it to a triple. Might not be that quite as obvious when you look at it here. Could change it to a stem stitch line, maybe. Yep. I could do some different things with it, you know, to get some different effects. So clicking the outline gives me an outline all the way around the object. Clicking to the center line gives me a line right in the middle of the object. The preferred method, in my opinion, is that click to the turning fill. Again, because it's going to give us those extra angles that we are going to be able to work with, and we might be able to get some more pleasing results in our digitizing. So that's basically using all of those auto digitizing tools that are in our toolbox. Most professional people who are digitizing designs and are doing good quality designs are actually using some of the manual digitizing tools. So rather than being here in the auto digitizing toolbar, we would be using the regular digitizing toolbar. And maybe what we might want to do for some of these objects in here is actually digitizing some closed shapes. So I'm just going to go real briefly through this. Digitizing a closed shape means that I'm going to just walk around the outside edge of this parentheses here, and I'm doing some left clicks and some right clicks, and I'm creating my own design. All right, so it's a closed object, so when I get close back to where I started at, I'm just going to hit the enter button, and I've created an object. It doesn't look so great right now, I do have to admit. Again, what it did is it used a tatami fill. I would probably rather change this to a satin fill. I would probably want to come into the reshape tool and maybe change this. So that point, hitting my space bar, turning that into a curved point rather than a, maybe widening out a little bit here. This symbol right here is the cross, which is a, means that's where the design ends at. And where the diamond shape is at, this green diamond, that's where the design actually starts at. Here's my angle line, so maybe I would want to have a couple of different angles in this object. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, and I'm going to go to the edit objects. I'm going to add a few extra angles in here. One there, and then up here, I think I would like this to come down at an angle about like that. Let's hit enter and see what it did to our design. Yeah, not so great. Let's add another stitch angle down on this area here. Yeah, that's a little bit better. So, you know, just playing with stitch angles a little bit. We would also probably want to play somewhat with our stitch spacing. We're getting into some real fine tuning of a design here. Under your stitch settings, the manual spacing right here is how close together your stitches are. Now, typically one of the guidelines is that our thread, which is a 40 weight embroidery thread, we can estimate that the 40 weight embroidery thread is really about 4.4 millimeters thick. So when I digitize, I always change this default setting, and most of my satin stitches that I do, I stitch them at about a 0.45 spacing, rather than doing that auto spacing of the 0.36, which is the default in the program. So it gives a little bit lighter of a fill, a little bit smoother of an effect. Another thing you might want to look at changing when you're digitizing is some of the underlay. This is the underlay button here, and if I click, it's kind of blue, which means that there is some underlay under this object, which is the automatic default for how it's creating that object. If I wanted to adjust the underlay, I could either turn it off completely and there would be no underlay under there, or under the stitching tab for this object, which has been selected, I can look at the stitching and see what did it assign as underlay. Now, underlay is pretty important for most embroidery designs. It's the first layer of stitches that goes down on the fabric. to help support the top stitches that are actually what we see in our embroidery design. So the underlay that it has assigned is a zigzag. My preferred method of underlay, especially on a thin little object like this, would probably be either an edge run or a center run. So I'm going to just switch it from a zigzag to an edge run. And if I turn off my true view and I look at this object, this under here, you can see this straight line that's right around the outside edges underneath the zigzag of the satin stitch. That's my edge run underlay. All right. And then these are the actual stitches back and forth of those satin stitches. All right. So you can kind of see what the program did there. And anyway, that's a brief, very brief introduction to either using your auto digitizing toolbar or maybe doing a little bit of manual digitizing and learning how to digitize your designs. Now there is another option, and that is that if you have a true type font installed in your fonts of your computer, and if one of those fonts that you have is mathematical symbols, you could choose to use your letter and monogramming toolbar. All right, so I just recently actually installed a font that is a mathematical font, but I did that after my Hatch software was already open, and so it's not going to show up as one of the options under my lettering tab, unfortunately. So maybe what I could do is I could restart my software and I could show you maybe some of the symbols that were in there would be something that we could use here in combination with just some regular letters from our embroidery styles of lettering that we've got in the computer. So hey, this is what I'm going to just recommend that you do. Let's just pretend for now that I'm going to maybe just digitize this letter U. So I could come into my lettering toolbox and I could just type in a U, lowercase. There it is, right? There it is. I could position it over this part of your equation. You know, you could choose a different letter that might suit the style of this a little bit better. I don't know enough about this mathematical equations to know whether or not this particular style is more of a letter or is it more of a mathematical symbol. But at any rate, what I'm saying is that if you didn't like this, you could adjust it and maybe pick a different font that would work better for your purposes. Drag a corner and that enlarges it a little bit, so maybe that's how you could get that symbol. You know, back in lettering, I know we would have an equal sign for this font. Let's look here under symbols. There's an equal. Let's say okay. Let's put it over here. So, all right, that's just another way that you might want to think about looking at your artwork and digitizing some parts to it. You know, using the built-in lettering and possibly your mathematical equation symbols that are available through Windows through the two-type fonts. Okay, you guys. Anyway, lots of fun here and lots of potential. And I'm going to leave it to you. If I hear back from you and you actually want me to digitize this for you, I would be happy to. Just let me know what size you want it. And I would challenge you guys, though. Go ahead and play with the software and see what you are able to do on your own. Okay, have fun with it. Bye for now.